Hello fellow humans and welcome to the Madhouse. I'm Josh and today should be Top 5 Wednesday, but I'm going to cheat a little bit. It is in fact going to be Top 1 Wednesday because the topic is Top 5 books or pre-orders being released in the next 6 months or the second half of the year. And I only have one because the rest of the books I'm excited about aren't coming out until next year or the year after that. Life's a bit sometimes, just damn the linear nature of time and causality. Now, in order to spice this up a little then, I'm going to try and play a little game. If this works, brilliantly. If it doesn't, you'll never find out what game it was. It's just one of those mysteries of life. So, and now for on Who Wants to Be a Bookish Millionaire? We have my audience, whoever it is there. Hello. Why am I putting on this voice? It doesn't sound like anyone, and certainly not like Chris Tarrant. Oh well, I'll stick with it. Oh my goodness. The final question for £1 million or a shit ton of brownies. I want brownies now. I'm going to have to do some baking later. Who wrote the book Josh is excited about? Is it A. Agnes Nutter? Is it B. Horace Warblehat? Is it C. Tack? Or is it D. Terry Pratchett? Now remember that you have 3 lifelines. There is Google. There is my previous videos where I've talked about this book quite enthusiastically. And there is obsessive fandom like I have. And also you can look at where my finger is pointing right now. That voice isn't the same again either. Okay, so you said C, Tack. Is that your final answer? Would you like to use a lifeline? I'm doing it again. No. Very well then. Computer, will you light up their choice? C, Tack. Is that the correct answer? I'm sorry, that's the incorrect answer. You get no money and no brownies. Unless you make them yourself. Though I wouldn't try making money in the actual fabrication sense because prison is bad. The answer is, of course, Sir Terry Pratchett. So now that book is The Shepherd's Crown. It's due to be released on the 27th of August. I am really excited for it. Of course there were some other Pratchett releases this year, all of them released posthumously. Well, most of them at least. There was of course The Long Utopia, wherever that is, I'm going to fall over, which I am hoping to review on Friday, assuming I remember to film it. Now, as for The Shepherd's Crown itself, let me tell you a little bit of what it's about. I'll read the blurb, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts on it. A shivering of worlds. Deep in the chalk, something is stirring. The owls and the foxes can sense it, and Tiffany Aching feels it in her boots. An old enemy is gathering strength. This is a time of endings and beginnings. Old friends and new, a blurring of edges and a shifting of power. Now Tiffany stands between the light and the dark, the good and the bad. As the fairy horde prepares for invasion, Tiffany must summon all the witches to stand with her, to protect the land, her land. There will be a reckoning. Sorry, I get shivers whenever I read that. I imagine I'm going to enjoy this book a lot, in fact perhaps the most of any books this year, because I really love Terry Pratchett's writing. Tiffany Aching was one of my favourite characters in great series, but I am also aware of the fact that I might be looking at it through, is it rose-tinted lenses? Because after an author's death, their books always receive the best reviews, they're more popular than ever, and people tend not to be so critical. I myself could be quite guilty of that. But regardless of all that, let me tell you what I'm expecting from the book. It's fairly obvious that the fairies are returning. Let's face it, it's explicitly stated. Now, old enemy suggests that it is the Queen, not this Queen, but the Fairy Queen. And that makes sense because the Queen has tried to invade before, but the last few times she's done it, she's had it handed to her. Tiffany beat the shit out of her, well, figuratively speaking, and maybe a little bit literally, with her frying pan and the Knack-Mack-Feagle. And Granny kicked her out with a little bit of help from Magrat and Nanny Odd. So she knows she can be beaten and I don't think she'd risk it. But having said that, it's also known that the Queen is not the brightest individual. What I'm hoping though is that we get to see something of the elusive fairy king. There are never stories about the fairy kings. It's always about the queen, so I'd love to see something interesting. And something we do know about the fairy king is that he is very clever, which could be why Tiffany needs to summon the other witches. Now, on a similar note, the blurb says that they're in the chalk, but I'm a bit confused because the front cover shows Tiffany standing very clearly in what happens to be Lainey. And more specifically than that, she's by Granny's cottage. You can see a rundown cottage in the background with the beehives, and there's bees flying all around. So it's Granny's place, and it does make me worry a little bit though. From this we can draw two conclusions. One, that Tiffany has to go to the witches and get them to come to the chalk, which makes sense because they don't have telephones and the Clacks is notoriously unreliable. And two, we can presume that something has happened to Granny. We don't know what. She may be gone like she was in Carpe Jugulum, or she may be dead. And I'm saying this because she was in her late 70s in Carpe Jugulum. So it's pretty safe to say that by this one, where Tiffany has to be at least 18 now, Granny is in her late 90s. It's entirely possible that age came for. Having said that, there is some evidence to the contrary as well. No, the bees are all flying around, but they're flying around in an orderly fashion, as though there's some mind being extended over them. Now, there are only two people in the Discworld books who are known to be able to do that. There is the Queen, but then they wouldn't be flying around Tiffany like that, and Granny. So Granny could be doing that. It's entirely possible, of course, that Tiffany has learned how to do it because she's exceptionally good at that sort of thing, but I'd rather like to think that Granny is still around in some form, even if she has had a physical departure. Unless I'm very mistaken, I think we'll definitely see Granny's story come to a close in one form or another. And then, because from this, we can say that because of Granny's absence, Tiffany will take up Granny's witchy mantle thing. Tiffany has officially been trained by Miss Level and Miss Treason and Nanny Og, but the one who's really trained her and taught her things that the others couldn't was Granny. Granny was the one who taught her how to be a witch, and she's not had many apprentices really. She had Esk, who's off exploring in time, so Tiffany was the only apprentice left, the only one there to replace her. And that would make sense as well, because gathering the witches together to fight the Queen is something that only a leader could do, assuming of course that Granny's not around, because Granny would not allow a leader to come around. She doesn't approve of leadership among witches. I mean, what's that quote? Granny was the most important of the leaders they didn't have. Now, that'll have to do for today because I have to go and start baking. I'm sorry that I could only mention one book, but I don't tend to read many new books, they tend to be old ones. As it is, what do you reckon? Do you have any thoughts as to the book? Do you think I'm completely wrong, or do you agree with me? Let me know, especially you, Vivka, because I know that you are a big Pratchett fan person. Pratchetteer was what we voted on the Discworld monthly page, but not everyone likes that one. I personally think it's great. And also, are you looking forward to any new books coming out? Maybe you'll mention one that I'll actually be interested in. Go on, do it! Do it now! That didn't really work for me, does it? As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please click like and subscribe wherever it is on your respective devices. If you look down there, you'll see my book recommendation, which is The Knife of Net and Go by Patrick Niss. And if you look over there to the left or my right, you'll see 2 of my old videos. Goodbye.